Hey everyone, it's your girl, Dr. T, and I just wanted to do a bit of an election recap. If you were with us last night as we live streamed, we had a good time watching the results come in. And so you saw, whether you were with us or not, you saw that the Democratic Party, um, or I should say the progressive candidates, had a damn near clean sweep, right? And we can look at that and look at the statements that it's made in a pushback to the Trump administration and all those kinds of things. I actually wrote an article about this, kind of thinking of what do the Dems do with this momentum, right? It's called, Will the Dems Blow a 28-3 Lead? And if you get that, then shout out to you. But I really kind of look at some of the issues that the Democrats have that even though they had success last night, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to continue to be successful, right? And so one of the things that I do point out is that so many people cast their votes as votes against Donald Trump's administration. And so if there were any candidates that were like staunchly MAGA or like, extremely conservative and right wing, excuse me, people came out and just voted against them and not necessarily for the progressive candidate. I'm not saying that's across the board. There were definitely some local elections where people really came out because they really supported. But let's be honest, that wasn't the case all of the time. And I'm not saying that we should be hypercritical about this, but I'm saying that we need to think about the implications going forward. One of the things that I discussed on the live is that when the candidates win by like 4 or 5 points, it's cool, but it doesn't really give you confidence going into the midterms. When they win by like 8, 10 more points, then you can kind of feel like, all right, I think we're going to be okay. And in a lot of these elections, and I'm thinking about, New Jersey with Mikey Sherrill, it was a narrow margin, right? So Jersey remains so-called blue, but still will have work to do in the midterms. What we saw in this first election of this new Trump regime was people like pushing back and saying, no, we don't like this. You can't take our SNAP. You can't, harm the farmers. What ICE is doing to these immigrants, these people that we know and love and work for us and work with us, that our kids are with, what you're doing to them is wrong. The government shutdown is wrong. And I said before that the best things that any progressive candidate had going for them was the fact that SNAP benefits were going to be delayed and that the government would be shut down. And I said that because I don't want you all to get so caught up in all of this that you forget that the Democrats play some dirty shit too. And don't think that they weren't prioritizing their political benefit over the needs of the American people. If you believe otherwise, this probably isn't the show for you. But many of you understand, you picking up what I'm putting down. But this is a couple of things that I wanted us to look at. And namely, I'm looking at the responses from the Democrats, right? So if we think about the key races that they had, right? So again, I mentioned Zoran Mamdani in New York City. The mayor of New York City has often been called America's mayor. It's such a huge city with so much influence, global influence, right? It's like the center of our financial, our economy with Wall Street and things like that. So it's a pretty big deal, right, to be the mayor of New York City. I also mentioned Mikey Sherrill, who won as governor of New Jersey, and she beat Jack. I call him Shitterelli, whatever. He ran for governor like 3 times and lost every time. And it's just so weird that he keeps doing it over and over again. But he lost again to Mikey Sherrill. And a lot of that was carried by Black voters in the state of New Jersey, despite Mikey Sherrill not going to our communities and campaigning with us. They really carried on the back. There was also an increase in Asian voters. And that's important because if you don't know New Jersey like that, central New Jersey has a huge Indian and South Asian population, okay? These are people with money. These are people who pay full price for their kids to go to Rutgers and Princeton and all these things. So they turned out as well in support of Mikey Sherrill and going against this extremely white supremacist candidate. People were just tired. Then we look at Virginia, where Abigail Spanberger won, and she was going up against Winsome Earl Sears, a Black woman, a Jamaican woman who had extreme views, but also wasn't very smart. As a reminder, she thought that solar power would not work because the sun eventually goes down. So she didn't really have an understanding. She also said that it's not discrimination to fire someone because they're gay. It's ridiculous. But she came close, folks, to winning. She came close to winning, and we have to think about that. Donald Trump didn't endorse her. He hates Black women. We have said this many times. So he did not endorse her. And I think had he endorsed her, she might have had a chance of winning. Now, people are telling me, no, she wasn't going to win. I'm looking at the numbers, okay? She got way more, over 40% of the vote, and she should not have even had 10% because she's absolutely ridiculous. So MAGA was coming out hardcore, and had he endorsed her, might have made this much closer or even tipped her over, right? But Abigail Spanberger she won, and I believe she's the first woman to be the Virginia governor, okay? And then you had the California voters. They voted yes to Proposition 50, which is about allowing state legislators to redistrict before the midterm elections. I'm actually not a fan of this. You all know that. It's where I diverge from a lot of people. A lot of people say they're playing, they're fighting fire with fire, and I totally get that. But I think it sets a really bad precedent that, people can just redistrict any state, right? And so Texas redistricting, now California's doing it. What's the next state to do it? Georgia, what's going to happen, right? So, you got to be mindful with that. I'm not big on the gerrymandering and redistrict. Okay, that's what it is. But a lot of people are happy about that, so I'm not going to take your joy away from you. But then you look at a local election like in Marietta, Georgia, for example, a young man, 24 years old, Sam Foster, was running against the incumbent, Steve Tumlin, who has been there for many terms, right? He lost by 87 votes, right? And so I talk a lot about in the article about the importance of local elections and how we all need to remember that, while the federal elections, the presidential elections will always be tainted as long as the electoral college exists, these local elections really do come down to those votes. And so that young man lost by 87 votes, and had 88 people showed up just to cast a vote for him, he might have won. So that's important. But I want to look at the way that the folks have responded. And first, I'm going to show you Donald Trump's response to this, which I think is what it is. Let's watch.
Not expected to be a victory. It was very Democrat areas, but I don't think it was good for Republicans. I don't think it was good. I'm not sure it was good for anybody. But we had an interesting evening, and we learned a lot. If you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans, and that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor. But I don't know about that, but I was honored that they said that. But countless public servants are now not being paid, and the air traffic control system is under increased.
So he was talking about that, and basically he's blaming him not being on the ballot, which is so weird because, like, Donald Trump, you're not running for anything. What ballot could you have possibly been on? Did he mean that, he wasn't endorsing people? Is he trying to suggest that the only way that Republicans come out and turn out is if he's on the ballot? Very narcissistic, very, naked emperor of him to say. But, he's kind of suggesting that. And then the government shutdown, which they continue to blame the Democrats for it. I think people are very clear that it has nothing to do with the Democrats. They're not doing that. The Democrats are trying to protect the American people from having their healthcare costs skyrocket, right? And so the GOP and MAGA are holding people hostage by denying them access to SNAP and food benefits that they need to eat, literally trying to starve people into capitulating. And so thankfully, the Democrats have not given in, and that I think the American people are willing to tighten up, and they're willing to have mutual aid and community care to provide for each other while they fight it out, because this is super important. Yes, it is temporary pain and food and things like that, but the impact of the healthcare costs rising in the thousands per month for families is far more devastating And I don't like to compare oppressions and things like that, but that's the reality of it. And so shout out to the Democrats for holding that steady. And so let's look at also, I want to look at hold on, I want to look at what let's look at what, let's see. Oh, Pete Buttigieg, right? So a lot of people, he's kind of come under fire. Pete Buttigieg has, made the statement, and he said New Jersey and Virginia have chosen well by electing Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger as their next governors. They are proven leaders who won by focusing on what matters most, how politics and policy can make everyday life better and more affordable. And so the fascinating thing about that is you see the glaring omission. He did not mention Zoran Mamdani. Again, no, he did not win as a governor, but he won as, as the mayor of New York City, which the city has almost the same population of people in Jersey. Like it's anyway, not mentioning that is totally absent, but Pete Buttigieg is bought and sold by AIPAC as well, and you're not going to see AIPAC-funded elected officials even saying his name. And what's really interesting is that I tried to scroll through his profile, don't see Zoran's name anywhere in recent days, and so that kind of speaks to what that's about. People have been dragging him for that. Then you've got, let me see. Then you've got Kamala Harris, and kind of thinking about this, and I brought this up because she posted, I'm saddened to learn of the passing of former Vice President Dick Cheney. Vice President Cheney, blah, 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 devoted public servant, all this stuff like that. And the reason why that matters in this context is because this is why you don't win. Right? This is why you don't win. You say these things and you're celebrating a war criminal and lamenting his death and all these kinds of things, and people hate you. What they want to do is they want to hear you show up and say, I endorse Zoran Mamdani for the mayor of New York City, which she did not do. Now, she put this video up, and I don't need to show it to you, but she put this video up celebrating the Democratic wins. And that's something that that all of them are doing. They're just kind of blanket saying Democratic wins. Just to remind you all, Zoran Mamdani is not a Democrat. He's a member of the Democratic Socialist Party. And then the working family parties in New York City especially worked really, really hard. When I lived in New York, that's who I voted with, and that's who I aligned myself with. He's not a Democratic win. And so you kind of have to look at that wordplay and how they're all talking about, the Democratic wins, just being general, right? Then you've got, let's see, just pointing out that Joe Biden also celebrating a war criminal and things like that. Somebody said to me, well, why are people going in on Kamala Harris and not Joe Biden? Well, we expect a white man, an old white man who has a history of sexism and racism to shout out, a fellow warmongering white man. But Kamala Harris is supposed to be different. And I think this just kind of reveals just how different she is not, right? So I think that that's also important. Let's see, we got this here. Barack Obama says, congratulations to all the Democratic candidates who won tonight. It's a reminder that when we come together, we can be strong around. I'm going to show you guys this because I want to scroll through something. I need you all to see this for yourselves. Now, I only have an X account just so I can kind of look through this stuff. I do not post on there, and it's totally fine. But if you look, you'll see he's talking about voting on November 4th. You see him posted up with Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey. He actually ends up and goes and it was stumping for her. So Abigail Spanberger, he also goes and he stumps for her and he's endorsing her. Let's see, talking about the Dodgers. He's going back again. Mikey Sherrill again. Mikey Sherrill again. Mikey Sherrill again. Abigail Spanberger again. Abigail Spanberger again. Another one for Abigail Spanberger. All these things. Now this is going back to November 1st. Nothing for Zoran Mamdani. Okay, and that's important, y'all. That's like super important. I need y'all to recognize this for what it is. He needed that support too. He's going up against Andrew Cuomo. There's Andrew, right? Jesus. Mario, Andrew, Chris, all of them. They're all the same. They're all horrible men, but whatever. But why didn't he post that? That would have been so amazing, but he didn't. He didn't do it intentionally. And that is part of the problem with the Democratic Party. And then I'm thinking about Hillary Clinton. What did she say? Oh, gosh. So Hillary Clinton, the hypocritical woman that she was recently asked about, you know, if she would endorse him or what have you. And she walked around it, didn't really say much of anything. And then I'm going to show you again. Here we go. If we go back to um, X, you'll see right here, she says, is it election day where you are? Lucky you. Get all the information you need to vote for fantastic Democrats like Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, and important measures like yes on Prop 50, right? And so what they did then was they aligned themselves, of course, the DNC is going to align themselves with the Democrats or what have you. But Zoran Mamdani won the Democratic primary in New York. So what, his affiliation as being part of the DSA shouldn't have mattered. He was the Democratic candidate, right? And so he did all of this without the support of the established Democrats. And I'm telling you this, I think that helped. I think that him not getting these endorsements from these dinos, right? And these establishment Democrats make for people that, you know what? He is actually on our side. He's so progressive that these centrist, warmongering, lying, hypocritical imperialists are not going to endorse him. And I think that that's what made a lot of people feel like, you know what? I feel good about supporting him. Because it's very clear that people want change. They want something different. The younger folks are tired of old white men, wealthy white women. They're tired of it, right? And so where do we go from here? Now, I'm not sure how many of you have thought about this, but when you look at Spanberger and you look at Cheryl and you look at some of the other white women that won, these people were kind of that had formed a coalition that was supposed to be the anti-squad. Now, when you think about the squad, you think of AOC, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, right? These racialized women who were kind of supposed to be representing this progressive voice. And I say supposed to be because look at what has happened with AOC. But they were supposed to be representing it. These white women, these mostly blonde white women, were coming along and we're like, we're not like the squad, but we're gonna do this thing. And all these women won. They all won, right? And so we have to think about the machine. We have to think about the Democratic Party machine. Hakeem Jeffries. How long did he go without endorsing Zoran Mamdani, right? How many times was he asked and he danced around it and avoided it, right? What does that do for the party? And so we can look at the election yesterday and you could be excited about it. You can feel like, it's definitely a referendum and you're just like, okay, we see where we're going. But don't rest on your laurels, folks, because there's so much more that needs to happen for the Democratic Party to win back a lot of the voters that they lost during the Harris campaign, right? Like, we're talking about Black folks came out in New Jersey and such like that, but Harris lost. She received less of the Black vote than Hillary Clinton did, right? Definitely less than Joe Biden and significantly less than Obama. So what are they planning to do? And so they're focusing on the midterms. And I've been saying, like, y'all think that these midterms are going to happen. Let's see. Trump, he's out there, making all kinds of threats. And I'm telling everybody, let's just brace and see, because we're probably going to get some executive orders, probably going to get some weird tariffs. He's probably going to, delay this government shutdown even more, probably going to rob people of their benefits. Whatever it is, he's going to lash out, because that's what he does. And that's what tyrants do to try to regain control or regain a sense of control. So we can expect that to happen. But I don't want people to get too comfortable with this. This isn't it. This isn't it. And then we think about, I think about, the situation in Pennsylvania where they had these Supreme Court judges and they had to go and vote, where they're going to keep their positions. And it was like the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is 5-2 Democrat to Republican. People had to vote to give these people another 10 years or what have you. And I just want to kind of look at the voter turnout for Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are typically considered two blue cities in what is also called Pennsylvania, a very red city, right? Look at this. 33.78% turnout. There's over 1 million registered voters, and only 361,724 came out to vote. And this is notorious. This is notorious for Philadelphia with low turnout. Now, yes, I know voter disenfranchisement is a thing, but look at the registered voters. That's how Cheryl Parker ends up winning with very low turnout, things like that. Folks have got to do better, right? You look at across the whole state, these were the judges that were running, and you look at yes versus no, right? Average of 2.1 million saying yes, an average of 1.3 million saying no, in a state with 13 million people. Like, voter turnout is a thing. And now, when it comes to the Electoral College, we know that the states will give their electoral votes based on, the popular vote or what have you. There's more flexibility there for you to have a protest vote or to conscientiously abstain, especially if you live in a state that's solidly blue or solidly red or whatever situation is. You can almost, be assured that it's going to go to them anyway. Like, I live in a state that is solidly blue. It went to Kamala Harris, barely, but it went to her, right? So that's different. But when you have these local elections, when you have these really important elections that for people that are going to have direct impact on your daily lives, you have to show up, because those actually do count. And they do everything they can to rig these votes, to try to steal votes, to suppress votes, to intimidate people out of voting, to convince them that voting is not going to matter in these things, but they do. Like I said, that young man in Marietta, Georgia lost by 87 votes. Okay. So I just want you all to think about that, what that looks like. But we know that it's not supposed to stop at voting. I know how you white liberals can get. You ride your blue wave and you think, yeah, and you go to your little No Kings protest. But no, more of you need to become more civically engaged. You have communities. You need to be doing some volunteering in your communities. You need to be showing up at these pantries. You need to be making donations of food and money. You need to be volunteering. The holiday season is coming up. People are going to be incredibly overwhelmed. What are you going to do to uphold your civic duty to your fellow American citizen and other people who may be undocumented, but they are also here as part of our communities and they need support as well? What are you going to do, right? It can't just be about election day, all right? You have to go, and you have to go to the school boards, right? A number of school boards got flipped, right, throughout the country. I know we don't talk as much about them, but on these lower levels, these same people who were hardcore MAGA trying to change the curriculum and get our kids and stop our kids from reading Toni Morrison and James Baldwin and all these things, and saying DEI is bad and woke is bad, and forcing parents to sign permission slips just to learn about Harriet Tubman. Those people were largely pushed out of their positions, and the progressive candidates came in and they won. And so we're going to see some changes in the school boards as well. And so that's a good thing, right? These kids are stupid, y'all. They're not getting the education that they need. It is by design. We know from George Bush, No Child Left Behind, they really dug into their plan to make sure that young people don't learn anything. So hopefully with these changes to the school boards, and we'll start seeing some changes in curriculum and improvements in curriculum. Shout out to Baltimore. Their superintendent said that students are going to be learning cursive again. This is important. Why do you need to learn cursive? So that you can read old documents. They don't want the young people learning cursive so that they can't read things like the Constitution, right? It's all tied in together. But, congratulations to the winners. Congratulations to the people who were out there campaigning for those folks, all the people that donated to their campaigns, the fundraisers, the strategists, and all those things. All of you that were successful, congratulations to you. But that's just the beginning. That's one part, right? That's one battle, as they say, that we're still at war. We're at war against this fascist regime, and we cannot let up. I hope to see you all at the next live. I record on Tuesdays and Fridays, unless I say otherwise. If you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button so that you get these videos and you get these notifications. If you've been here before, hit the like button. And like I said, in the comments, I will have the link to the article that I wrote, and I hope you can check that out and subscribe to my Patreon. And, and you can also support me, CashApp FemJones, Venmo FemJones, and my PayPal is contact@feminisajones.com. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you for tuning in.